Good evening. I think there are still some folks who are joining either audio or video, and I would like to welcome you all here this evening. I want to let you know we will be recording, and so if you don't wish to appear on the screen, please don't turn your camera on when asking questions. And so, yes, good evening. Welcome and thank you to Cooperatives First for their sponsorship to make this happen, BC Cooperative Association for the support and use of the Zoom account, to my presenters, Russ Christensen and Darden Isufi, who we will meet here shortly, and for their time and their engagement in this topic, and to all the attendees for being here tonight. Sorry, just letting someone in there. Thank you for being here to learn more about cooperatives and with respect to the topic of platform cooperatives. Before going any further, I wish to express gratitude to the Secwepemc people whose territory, Secwepemc Ulu, I've lived, worked, and played for most of my life. And as a point of interest for those not from Kamloops, our city's name is derived from Kamloops, a Secwepemc scheme, or the language of the Secwepemc people, word, which essentially means the meeting of the waters. So we live where the North and South Thompson rivers meet. And so for some housekeeping here, it's easiest if we all keep our cameras off during the presentations. And I would ask you not only to do this, but to mute yourselves so that we don't have any feedback or things of that nature. So if you can do cameras off, that'd be great. You can put your questions in the chat. I will interrupt accordingly where it makes sense, and Russ has offered to answer questions as he goes along, and we will and Darden, I'm not sure if that's your preferred method or if we want to save the questions for you till the end, but we can address that. Oh, here.
I truly don't. Yeah, I'm fine with questions.
Okay, perfect. So I'll ask people to put their questions into the chat and go from there. Oh, and I will be uploading this recording as well as maybe some slides from our presenters if I can wrestle them off them. I forgot to ask them before this, so not putting you on the spot, but I will ask properly once we're not in this situation right here. Now I'm going to share my screen so that you can see my slideshow about, oops, where did everybody go? Darn it. Oh, this is the agenda, anywho. So, there we are, I'm sharing. Okay, I know that it seems like I should have this down pat by now, but I'm still sort of in the learning process, and I appreciate everyone's patience with me, thank you. And I basically just went through the agenda. We'll do introductions. What is a co-op? That will be me. Russ will present on platform cooperatives. Darden will present on EVA, his company in Montreal. And then we'll have time for takeaways and questions. So I will start introducing myself. My name is Daphne Nelson. I like to consider myself an idealistic community builder. I have lots of past involvement with local food groups in Kamloops, including the Kamloops Food Policy Council and Farm to Chef Collaborative. I have volunteered for local businesses on the Community Futures Thompson Country Loan Committee while working as a lender with a large financial institution. And after that gig, I went to work for a former client and met the chair of Interior Savings Credit Union here in Kamloops, who asked me to join the board. So I was nominated and elected the second go around. And during that process of onboarding as a director for a credit union, I fell in love with the cooperative model because it was a brilliant mix of a business model, people working together and giving back to community and in a holistic manner. So the cooperative model to me feels like home, given all of my past experiences, including working at a large financial institution. So I was asked to work on the Kamloops Public Market Cooperative due to my involvement with the credit union. So I developed and incorporated it as a founding director here in Kamloops. And I took the Co-op Zone Advanced course on cooperative development to shed more light on the model here, particularly in the interior of British Columbia. We are not necessarily as familiar with the cooperative model as other areas of our beautiful province and country, actually. So I like to say, and here we are. And then I would like also to introduce the Kamloops Public Market Cooperative, because that is also why we're here. The Kamloops Public Market Cooperative was founded to create a common space where local producers and consumers could come together and share in the bounty of the region. With a physical location on hold, we decided to participate in the cooperative principle education about cooperatives. Pre-COVID, we hosted 3 in-person events on varying topics that we could, and decided that we could easily pivot this offering to an online format to allow for more participants and, more obviously, avoid any issues around social distancing. This is our 4th webinar to shed light on the potential applications of the cooperative model, and in this case, we're going to talk about platform cooperatives. And so here is where I usually ask the presenters to do a brief intro of themselves so that people know who we're going to be talking to. So Russ, if you don't mind doing a brief intro.
Sure, that's great. Thanks, Daphne. Appreciate being here tonight, and thanks everyone for joining us. So my name's Russ Christensen. I've been a co-op developer for about 35 years, and I've helped develop well over, I don't know, 200 or 300 cooperatives. And I'm pretty excited about the platform cooperative idea because I think it's the next wave of cooperatives.
Awesome, thank you very much. And Darden, do you mind sharing your bio briefly?
Yeah, well, I'm Darden Yusufi, 23 years experience as a human being. Freshly graduated from McGill University in political science. I'm now Chief Operating Officer at EVA, the 2nd largest ride-sharing app in the whole province of Quebec, and the first driver-owned and rider-owned co-op in North America to be fully up and running.
Wonderful, thank you. Super excited to hear more about that. And now I'll dive right into what is a cooperative, because sometimes people are not familiar with the topic, and I like to provide that layer prior to getting into the topic this evening, the platform cooperatives. And I like to just read this definition because I really love it. It carries all the features of a good, what I like to call a good definition. So co-ops are democratically owned enterprises controlled by members who share a common need and see cooperative as the best way to meet this need. So regardless of the direction you're approaching it from, the people who benefit from the cooperative are the members, and that is why they're coming together. And so if we think about it in the big picture of our lives, we don't always tend to come together, but the cooperative model allows us to do that. And so, as I mentioned, the members benefit from the surface. And I also like to mention the triple P bottom line, which is people, planet, and profits. So not necessarily profits first. You have to be profitable in order to continue operations, but that isn't the overarching goal. So why cooperate? And I thought about putting this in today because I thought, you know, we talk about what a cooperative is, but why not talk about why? Access to human capital. So when we are a group of people working together as opposed to a solo entrepreneur, we have a lot of different skill sets that we may offer the group of people coming together. So Bob may be a builder, but Nick may be able to market Bob's skills and get him greater access to more people. So when you have people coming together with varying skill sets or backgrounds or diversities, greater things can happen. We can share resources instead of hoarding them. Why does everybody need a car? Or why does everybody need a boat here in the interior? why don't we all think of different ways of coming together, maybe even around capital items. We can create community. The group of people that you're forming the cooperative with will undoubtedly can create a larger community for the community that you're living in. But those people, I don't know if you've noticed, but you end up living on a street and not necessarily knowing all the people on your street nowadays. So let's just start getting to know people and create a greater sense of community. And I just put in why not to be cheeky, because really I love the cooperative model, and so should you. I like to share a little video here, and it is all about what is a cooperative. It's from Britain, but it still gives us a good...
Ownership matters. It gives people a say in the things they care about. Being an owner in a business, for example, gives people motivation and a stake in its success. But over the last 30 years, the number of people who have control over the businesses that shape our lives has become smaller, not larger. It's no surprise that when you ask them, people say they have no influence in their workplace, over businesses, and over the economy as a whole. Cooperatives, however, offer a solution. From the outside, they may look like any other business, but inside they are very different. They're owned and controlled together by the people closest to the business: employees, customers, residents, suppliers, not distant shareholders. They have an equal say in how the business is run, and they even decide what to do with the profits. And cooperatives work. There are nearly 7,000 independent co-ops in the UK. They're found in every sector, from high street retailers to farmer-controlled businesses, cooperative pubs and credit unions. Some of our most famous brands come from cooperatives, from champagne and parmesan to Lurpak butter and bird's eye peas. Even Barcelona Football Club is a co-op owned by its fans. Co-ops contribute £37 billion each year to the British economy and boost UK productivity, innovation and entrepreneurship. And they work for the 15 million members who together own the UK's co-ops. Cooperatives give people, in fact all of us, more control over the things that matter. What do you want to do together?
There we are. Sometimes I struggle getting it from the video. Cooperatives are based on the 7 cooperative principles. In recent years, I say that because Indigenous peoples have always cooperated, and cooperation is among their principles and their values systems as well. But more recently, we've had the Rochdale pioneers who have put these cooperative principles together, and we like to talk about them generally. So voluntary open membership, democratic member control, cooperation among cooperatives, autonomy and independence, member economic participation, concern for community, and educating, training, and information about cooperatives. And that's the principle we're here sharing under. And to sort of add on to the little video that we talked about, or that we watched together, there are different types of cooperatives, and just going back to the original definition of what is a cooperative and how these cooperatives come together. A consumer cooperative would be a group of people who want to come together to buy a product or a bunch of products together, whereas a producer co-op would be the people who want to sell that product to the consumers. Financial co-ops are credit unions and other maybe insurance companies. There are worker co-ops out there, the beneficiaries of which are the workers who are forming their co-op. Community service co-ops, in the case of in Nelson, British Columbia here, there is a radio co-op who offers their community service of free cooperative radio station things. And investment co-ops, where people come together to pool their resources in order to enable other cooperatives to borrow money from them. Multi-stakeholder co-ops allow consumers and producers to come together, or any variants of all of these different types of cooperatives. And there are actually housing cooperatives, which a lot of people are living in throughout Canada and other places in the world. And so that is the end of my presentation. And if there are questions, please feel free to ask them. But moving right along, we can get Russ to begin his presentation. I just need to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to him. So Russ, I am making you the host, and now you are the host. So Russ will need a minute to share his screen, and I will mute myself. You may be muted.
Okay, great. Just give
Okay.
me 1 second. Okay, so I can't actually see, is that the context should be showing as a slide? Is that working?
I don't have your screen sharing up.
It's not working. Okay.
I can pull yours up here at my end if you just want to do it that way.
Yeah, I don't know why it's not working. I was working before, but sure.
Yeah.
You can go ahead if you want to try that.
If you can make me the host,
Okay.
I will be able to do that. Yeah, we just tried this.
Okay, well, let me try one more time, see what happens.
Oh, there we are.
Okay,
Perfect.
good. Great.
There we go.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Okay, so here we go. I want to just provide a little bit of the context of platform cooperatives and the need that they come out of. And some of this is going to be, new to people, and some of it may not be new. But I think it's really important to understand the context of co-op development. And with platform cooperatives, of course, it's the tech world, and how do we get people's needs fulfilled? So in 2019, Shoshana Zuboff, who's a longtime professor at Harvard Business School, published a book that she'd researched for 8 or 9 years called The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. And you can hold your hands up if you've read the book. But I think it's an incredible book. It's a hard slog to get through this book, but the amount of information and the research that she did is really astounding. And I think it's interesting to look at how the robber barons of the early 1900s, particularly in the UK and the United States, but other countries too, used Herbert Spencer's survival of the fittest, which is a social Darwinist term. Darwin never said that, but Herbert Spencer did. And it was basically to justify the wealth that they had. And today's surveillance capitalists justify their very much unprecedented concentration of information and wealth as the unavoidable result of free markets and network effects. So history is repeating itself in this capitalist system that we live in. This is a graph showing the market capitalization of the top 10 publicly traded US tech companies. And you can see that from 2016, so that's 16 on the left, to 2020, that's 20 on the right, that Apple, Amazon, Alphabet, which is Google, and Facebook have increased their market capitalization significantly. And in fact, Apple just broke the $2 trillion mark as the first company in the United States to break that mark with the stock market in the US. So this combined $5 trillion, the 4 top tech companies, represents just a huge amount of the stock market. There's been, like I was saying, Apple had a 60% increase in its market capitalization since the pandemic. So that's really quite an incredible amount of speculation on Apple. And we've got 780 billion approximately in annual revenue, which represents about 7% of the unpaid care work that women of the world do. And I think it's interesting to make comparisons like that. Amazon, with sales of 280 billion, is equal to Pakistan's GDP. Apple's close second. It's the amount of Vietnam's GDP. Alphabet, Google is 162 billion in annual revenue, equal to Ukraine's GDP. And then Facebook at 71 billion and growing quickly. It's the same as Venezuela's GDP last year. So 4.6 billion people are on the internet in the world. That represents 60% of the human population. And 4.6 billion people in the world also, their wealth, if you total it all up, is equal to the same amount as 2,153 billionaires' wealth. And the 22 richest men in the world have the same amount of wealth, actually greater than the wealth of all the women in Africa. And if we had a 0.5% tax increase on this 1% of the wealthiest people, we could create 117 million care jobs, which during a pandemic is, I think, a worthwhile thing to do. So 6 of the top richest men in the world are surveillance capitalists. We've got Jeff Bezos in the #1 position. He's increased his wealth by 62% since the pandemic started. That's $73 billion. It's an astounding amount of money. Bill Gates from Microsoft, Mark Zuckerberg, Steve Ballmer, another Microsoft founder, Larry Ellison from Oracle, and then Larry Page from Google. So those are the top 6 richest men. They're all in the surveillance capitalist business. So it is overtaken every other industry. Exxon was taken off the New York Stock Exchange today. So was at one point the world's largest corporation, but now Amazon has the highest, and Apple together. So why is this such a big deal? It's a big deal because these big tech companies shape everyone's lives. So the 4.6 billion people that are on the internet, they're using social media, Facebook, Google, etc. They influence very much the goods that we buy, Amazon, for example, the media we see, how we connect with our friends and families, and how we understand the world and how we vote politically. So they have a huge impact. From an economic point of view, this is Thomas Piketty. I'm sure people have heard of his book, Capital in the 21st Century, which is about the growing inequality of wealth. And this quote is, I think, important because the tech companies spend millions and millions of dollars every year for lawyers to lobby, particularly the American government, but other governments around the world, so that they're not regulated. And this is something that's going to have to change, unless, if it doesn't, we'll just continue to see this growing inequality in our society and more serious consequences, which I'm going to get to. So the market economy is undermining democratic societies. This is what Thomas Piketty is talking about. Now, Shoshana's book is about 500 pages. And I've tried to summarize it in this one paragraph. So bear with me, but I just want to read this. So if you can just listen carefully to what I'm reading. Surveillance capitalism unilaterally claims human experience as a free raw material for translation into behavioral data. So they basically don't pay anyone for all the information and all the data and the photographs and where you are and where you eat and what you buy. They aren't paying anybody for any of that information. They're just collecting that data, and then they're putting it into behavioral algorithms, and then they are selling that data. So it's fed into this advanced manufacturing process known as machine intelligence, and then into behavior prediction products. So you've probably heard of B.F. Skinner, who was the founder of behavioral modification. This is a giant global experiment of behavior modification following B.F. Skinner's theories. So these prediction products anticipate what you'll do now, soon, and in the future, and that's why it's valuable to corporations, political parties, etc. And the prediction products are traded in a futures market. And this is a really important sentence. Through this mechanism, people lose their will to will, their social bonds and trust, the very things that democracies need to function. So this is fundamental to Western civilization, certainly to all human beings, the idea that our will to will is being taken from us through surveillance capitalism. I just added a new participant. So Wade Davis is an anthropologist. He teaches at the University of British Columbia. He had an article in the Rolling Stone magazine a couple of weeks ago, and he's talking about COVID-19. He's particularly talking about the falling of the American civilization. But it's interesting that the virus, COVID-19, is 10,000 times smaller than a grain of salt. Try and get your imagination around that. It attacks our physical bodies, of course, but it also attacks the cultural foundations of our lives. So the whole idea of social connectivity and belonging and community, the things that Daphne was talking about earlier, COVID-19 is making us all feel a little more socially isolated. We're not being able to see, you know, friends and family and grandchildren, and we aren't able to gather in large groups, which is really an important aspect for human beings. So the whole idea of organizing in our communities and organizing co-ops becomes much more challenging because we can't get together physically as groups. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm pretty tired of Zoom meetings overall, although tonight I'm very much enjoying this, but I think a lot of people are having fatigue about Zoom meetings, and so people are starting to have more physically distant outside meetings, at least while the weather's good in Canada. So Douglas Rushkoff is a really interesting person, and he's also a professor of economic history, and he wrote a book called Team Human. I highly recommend that book. And basically he's saying that nature is a collaborative act, and if humans are the most evolved species, it's because we've developed the most advanced ways of working and playing together. And I think this is something that people who are involved in cooperatives and interested in cooperatives really need to understand, because there's that old saw of, you know, it's a dog eat dog world, and you have to take care of yourself, and, you know, people are greedy, and all those old phrases that everyone on this call and everyone is aware of. But the reality is that human nature, just like nature itself, is based on collaboration and cooperation, and that's how we're successful as a species. We're extremely successful as a species. So I think we need to rewrite the idea that it's survival of the fittest. It's really the survival of the species who know how to cooperate and work together. Tessa McWatt is a professor of English literature in England, but she is a Canadian. And she had this article in the Globe and Mail recently, and she's talking about how, because of the pandemic, it's time for all of us to be engaged in radical change, mutual care to repair our relations with each other in the natural world. And then she quoted Angela Davis, who was an activist in the 60s and 70s and 80s and is still around. I think she's still around. But she said that you have to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world, and you have to do it all the time. So when we think about platform cooperatives, just as Darden and his colleagues started EVA in Montreal against probably all odds, and I'm really excited to hear your story, Darden. The whole thing is that we have to feel that it's possible, that platform cooperatives are a possibility, and they truly are. So to reframe the discussion around economics and social development and the environment, we need to think about different kinds of ideas. And one thing that I want and encourage all of you to at least read a summary of, or get the book from the library, or listen to a podcast, or read some articles that are shorter if you don't want to read the whole book. But I think this is important. So this is, as I said earlier, global architecture of behavior modification. The threat has shifted from the idea of George Orwell's 1984 totalitarian Big Brother state to a global digital architecture, which is what Shoshana calls a big other, and it's operating in the interests of surveillance capitalism. It's not operating in the interests of society. There's unprecedented power that's marked by extreme concentrations of knowledge, and it's free from democratic oversight. I mentioned earlier that lawyers, many, many hundreds of lawyers are paid a lot of money by the big tech companies to ensure that they're not regulated. Hopefully that's going to change over the next 3 or 4 years. So with very little resistance from law or society, surveillance capitalism is on the verge of dominating the social order and shaping the digital future if we let it. So this is why it's important for us to think about cooperatives and platform cooperatives, because we don't want the world to be shaped by surveillance capitalism. It's a fundamental motivation. So when we think about reframing, there's all kinds of great ideas out there already. It's not like we have to reinvent things. So one of the best books that I've read on economics from an alternative point of view is this book called For the Common Good. It was published in 1989. It's still just as relevant today as it was then. There's a lot of great ideas in there in terms of triple bottom line. And just to summarize, it does deconstruct neoclassical economics, which is the basis of globalization and neoliberalism that we're living in today, and this growing disparity between rich people and rich countries and poor countries. This model and For the Common Good provides a holistic model. So it's a really far-reaching circular economy idea, and really positive, powerful ideas. So it doesn't just critique the neoclassical economic model, but it provides a holistic model that we can move forward with. The goal of this economic model that they're talking about is community and ecological balance. And they created their own index of sustainable economic welfare in 1989 versus GDP. And I think in Canada, we've got the Canadian Index of Well-Being, which is a fantastic measurement tool. And more organizations are adapting and adopting it. And hopefully we'll adopt it as a country, and provinces will adopt it as well. So it really is an economics for community. And that's a really important aspect of a triple bottom line. So Hazel Henderson was another economist. She was an Australian, and she wrote this book in 1991. It's a fantastic book, highly recommend it. Paradigms in Progress, Life Beyond Economics. So she reframes the old problems that we're facing, and they're just as relevant again today. Hyper competition, hyper toxic individualism, and she's looking to find new win-win pathways in the economy and in our communities. So she talks a lot about principles of interconnectedness between each other, between human beings and nature and all the creatures on the earth, that we need to look at redistribution of wealth and power, that we want to break down hierarchies and have a heterarchy, which is basically local democracy, that we need to look at things from a complementarity point of view, that it doesn't have to be opposing and polarized views. And of course, we have to embrace uncertainty and change. So Hazel Henderson is a really visionary person, and it's a wonderful read. So she talks about the economy being based on human choices versus the invisible hand, which is a concept that Adam Smith came up. He was an economist from Scotland in the late 1700s. Most of you have heard of him, but he came up with this idea of the invisible hand, which is really not working in any way in the current globalized capital and highly concentrated ownership structures. So Hazel's suggesting we make human choices and that we flatten the hierarchies in our economy in favor of local democracy. And that's really what cooperatives are fundamentally about. The whole idea is that we want to bring democracy, which is a great concept, and even though, you know, it has some flaws because it's a human invention, it's certainly better than the aristocracy or a kleptocracy or a plutocracy. So let's really put our energy into creating democracies, not just politically, but in our workplaces as well. So that's what co-ops are all about. The other thing that's really important is that Hazel talks about the long-term objectives versus short-term objectives. And of course, our economy is very much based on the short term. What are the profits or the share values this quarter or today or even this second for day traders? So the whole idea that we need to really shift our perspective on the economy from this short term obsession on profits and share value to a long-term perspective around human community, human well-being, the well-being of our ecology, and generational perspective, not just a short-term point of view. So often some of the best books on economics are actually written by non-economists. So Karl Polanyi wrote this, just an amazing book. It's a classic. Highly recommend this book called The Great Transformation. He's a historian and he summarizes the economic history of the Industrial Revolution and how it broke up the commons. So really amazing analysis and very, I think at the time, very creative and innovative. And it was published during the Second World War. So he talks about the social and economic changes that occurred from the Industrial Revolution. And one of the things that came out of that is the Rochdale Principles and the cooperative idea. So thank goodness for that. Number two, in terms of a summary idea of the Great Transformation, that there's fallacies of self-regulating markets. In other words, it goes back to what Thomas Piketty is saying today, that self-regulating markets are a myth, they don't work. In fact, free trade agreements are political creatures, they're made by people. So they're really not self-regulating at all, and they tend to eliminate competition and create oligopolies. So we're talking about here with Karl Polanyi the important need for government regulations of the economy, that government has a very important role in the economy. You can't just leave it up to the capital markets. So trickle down, even then in 1944, they were talking about, and Karl was talking about, trickle down economics doesn't work. And we know that Reagan and Thatcher reinvented or reintroduced that idea in the late 1970s and 1980s. And it's one of the reasons that we are in the shape that we're in today in terms of wealth inequality in our societies. So markets, from Karl Polanyi's point of view, are only one part of society, that markets should serve society rather than society serving markets, is his argument. And he was strongly in favor of choosing socialism or social democracy over fascism or neoliberalism. So again, that was during the Second World War. There were a number of fascist states, but now you can see fascist regimes and practices, including our neighbor to the south, the United States, which has been a great democracy, moving towards fascism. And certainly the world and globalization has really embraced neoliberalism. So we need to look at how we can bring it back to functioning democracies. So I want to just talk briefly about the triple bottom line and what that is. Daphne talked about the 3 Ps. I like to break it down into these 3 circles. So the biggest circle on the outside is the ecology, or the world that we all share, the natural world. That is, we get everything in our economy from the natural world, and then human labor transforms it. So the natural world is the biggest and most important aspect of our economy. And of course, we've been taking it for granted for 200 or 300 years since the Industrial Revolution, and we are starting to pay the price of that now with biodiversity destruction, habitat and species extinction, and climate change, plastic pollution, etc. So our economy has treated the ecology as an externality and just a dumping ground or a waste ground for human society. So we need to get back to the idea that the ecology is the most important aspect of our economy, and that human society is part of the natural world that we share with all other creatures. And then the human economy itself, the thing that so many people are obsessed with, and the whole idea of jobs and growth and the stock market. So the human economy really needs to serve the society. And that's why it's a smaller circle inside of human society, which is then embraced overall by the ecology. So Wendell Berry is an interesting author and poet and a local agriculture activist in the United States. And he calls this the great economy because it sustains the total web of life and all the other creatures that we share the world with. So that's the triple bottom line. And when we're thinking about platform cooperatives, we really need to think about the triple bottom line, and what we measure is important. So we need to try and measure the triple bottom line. So getting specifically into platform cooperatives, given that context and how important platform cooperatives are going to be in the coming decades. So there is a platform cooperativism consortium, that's quite a mouthful, out of the New School in New York City. And you can click on that link. Daphne will share my slides, and you can look at that, or you can look it up on Google right now. Or I don't actually use Google. I use DuckGoDuck, which is a free search engine from MIT, and it's not part of the surveillance capitalism business. So your privacy is protected, and there's other search engines too, and you can use Firefox, etc. So platform cooperatives are businesses that use a website, a mobile app, or a protocol to sell goods or services. So they're basically internet-based in terms of their interface with customers or workers. And the difference is that they rely on democratic decision-making. So that's what I was talking about earlier in terms of the thoughts of some of the great people that I was quoting in their books. How important democratic decision-making is, and how surveillance capitalism is really taking that away from us. Our will to make decisions of our own volition is being taken away through this behavior modification that's being reinforced through surveillance capitalism. The other important thing is that cooperatives and platform cooperatives have shared ownership of a platform by the workers and the users, just like Darden's going to talk about with Eva. So it's not, Jeff Bezos who's profiting immensely and in such an obscene manner. It's the whole organization, the workers, the users, so that they get their needs fulfilled and they benefit from that platform rather than being used by the platform. So this whole idea of surveillance capitalism is just an extreme exploitation of people without them really even knowing it. Most people aren't aware that they're being exploited in this way, because how many people are going to read that book, Surveillance Capitalism? So it's really up to us. I think this is part of co-op education too, that we educate people about capitalism and surveillance capitalism, let them know how they're being used and how their data is being used and what they can do about it. There's all kinds of great ways to protect your privacy, and then take the next step and join a platform cooperative or start one up. So the great thing is that platform cooperatives put the stakeholders, the workers and the users, ahead of the shareholders. So platform co-ops are really intended to create fair and dignified working conditions for the workers in the platform co-ops, and they offer profits and profit sharing for all of the members of the co-op, not just a few shareholders. And building on the 200-year history of cooperatives from the Rochdale pioneers and using the digital platform model, platform cooperatives are really combining the best of those worlds and using that really innovative approach to bring new ideas and services to people in a way that's democratic and that they're going to benefit. So there's a number of advantages for platform cooperatives. So the jobs are higher quality and have fair pay. Productivity increases generally in worker co-ops particularly, and there's more autonomy, so people have more control over their work. Cooperatives have a much higher survival rate than regular businesses, 2 to 4 times higher. And there's much lower worker turnover in platform cooperatives and cooperatives in general, especially in worker co-ops, because people share the ownership, the decision-making, and they share the profits. So there's much more control over privacy for the users and the workers. There's not the surveillance that the other big tech companies are using. And there's much more transparency in terms of sharing financial statements, decision-making through annual meetings, elections of boards of directors amongst the members. There's all kinds of practices that bring the great democratic ideas and principles from cooperatives to platform cooperatives. The other thing that I think is really important, and I've seen this in so many different sectors as a co-op developer with cooperatives, is how cooperatives share information and knowledge with each other so that they don't have to reinvent the wheel. They don't see each other as competitors, so they really work together to create and develop other cooperatives, smaller co-ops, new co-ops in their industries and support each other. And then they set up federations. So I can see at some point federations of platform cooperatives being set up internationally. I think that's it's sort of happening already. Smart co-ops, for example. And then the fundamental thing is that the members of cooperative, they have control over their business. And that's just such an important thing. That video that Daphne showed from the UK about how people, that human being figure, you know, in symbolizing the idea that people are feeling like they're losing more and more control in their lives. And it is a reality, because with surveillance capitalism, we are losing more control over our lives. So it's really important, the idea of platform cooperatives, to regain that sense of control in our lives, something that alone is worth doing. So Trebor Scholz is a professor at the New School in New York City and a world leader in platform cooperatives. He's got lots of great articles and a book written about it. He estimates currently that there's about 400 platform cooperatives internationally. So, and I think they're growing quite quickly. So this could be doubled or tripled in the next 2 or 3 years. So there's lots of opportunity for platform cooperatives. And I think the pandemic has just made that even more pronounced. Stocksy is an interesting platform cooperative that's been around for 8 or 9 years. It's out of Vancouver, BC. It's a multi-stakeholder co-op. So the workers and the photographers or members that post their photographs, it's like, that's what they do. That's what this co-op does. It provides a platform for artists and photographers to sell their work at a fair price and to make sure that they're getting decent royalties themselves, but also they provide royalty-free photos and videos for members. And the workers are also members of the co-op. So the fair pay piece of the co-op is really important. 50 to 75% of all the licenses and the fees from those go to the contributors. So the artists get 50 to 75% of the fees rather than the platform or the high-tech business taking the money. And the other thing, and this is a quote from Stocksy, that they also have this sense of community and ownership that is felt by their members. So that really creates a sense of shared passion and results in, from their point of view, much more inspired imagery and higher quality images than some of their competitors like Getty Images, for example. So I'm going to suggest that maybe you listen to 1 or 2 of these founders of co-ops. They're very short videos. I'm going to switch the host back over to Daphne, and Daphne's going to play 1 or 2 of these videos.
Right, I can do that. I've got the power. Oops, do
All
I?
right. Well,
I should actually.
Go ahead.
Maybe I might need to use the one I took and click. Okay. Sorry. Okay,
No.
I need you to unshare your screen actually.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't think I can actually click
okay.
your link.
Okay,
And then
gonna do that.
I'll use the presentation that you sent me.
Okay, and do I need to make you a host?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And oops, all the people are over here. It's handy having two screens, but it's also, so I've clicked on Jen here. Jen,
Great.
can you see this?
Yes.
Okay.
Hey there, I'm Jen Horangeff, founder and CEO of Savvy Cooperative. And Savvy is a platform that helps to connect companies or innovators in the healthcare space directly with patients so that they can learn from their lived experiences. And this was really important to me because I am somebody who considers himself a patient. I grew up with chronic illness and I went into healthcare working as a professional, as a human factors engineer, and as an academic researcher. And what I found was that all these people were talking about patients and trying to innovate for them, and they were never talking directly to them. So they kept making crappy products and services that weren't serving the purposes that the patients really needed. And so we created a platform that helped to more easily connect the two sides so that together they can innovate new solutions. And what's really important to us is this helps to democratize these opportunities so that more people have access to sharing their experiences. So it's not just a select few of us patients that are sharing on behalf of everybody else. We can really make sure that we're talking to people that are representative of the populations that we're really trying to serve so that we can collectively make new healthcare innovations more inclusive for everybody.
Oops. Okay.
So that was great. And Jen is a really
Yes.
interesting person.
That was really awesome. I'll go to Derek.
Yeah, so
On
Derek's in South Africa, and he's an Uber driver who's trying to organize something like Darden has done in Montreal.
Awesome. Okay, let's hear from him. Oops. There we go.
My name is Derek Oganzi, and I'm an Uber driver from Cape Town, South Africa. At a seminar hosted by the University of Cape Town, the Mandela Initiative, I met Professor Darcy du Toit, and we had a discussion of new forms of unions, because the traditional unions has become stagnated and useless. The idea of a platform cooperative was then flouted amongst us and is viewed as an alternate to the unions, where drivers own the platform. So, in my endeavor to establish a platform cooperative, I discovered Trebor Scholz on Facebook and started communicating with him regarding platform cooperatives. Many of the drivers are very excited about this initiative. The only problem is fear of deactivation. If we go up against Uber, Uber deactivate drivers and they will never be activated again. So platform cooperatives are the future for drivers, not only in South Africa, but I think all over the world.
Okay, that's great. Maybe we can do one more and then you can make me the host again and I'll finish my
Okay.
presentation. I think Lisa Pointer from the Smart Co-op, that's a really interesting, and it's
Okay.
expanding quickly all around the world. It's a co-op for freelancers.
Awesome.
Hey, welcome to Vienna. You're now in the Smart office, and I'm Lisa from Smart Austria. Smart is part of the platform cooperativism ecosystem, and we are part of the new cooperative movement. That's how we see ourselves. Smart actually has already 85,000 users, and we have offices in 40 different cities in 9 countries. We are 9 independent Smart partners. The idea behind Smart is to have a solidary roof for all freelancers. We started with artists, but by now we are open to all different freelancers. The idea is also to have like the freedom of freelance work combined with the security of an employment. What are the main benefits? People who work with us have proper insurance. They have unemployment insurance, pension, health, and accidents, which is quite good, and freelancers usually don't have that. We take over financial risks. So if the contract partner does not pay, we pay the salary anyways, or we pay the fee. There's a complete freedom. You can decide if you want to work with us for one contract, the next contract you do as a freelancer again. People who work with us have a more stable income, and they can count on something we pay instantly. So we have a payment guarantee. And of course, we create a certain community with all the people who work with Smart. If you're if you're interested in knowing more about Smart, just visit our website. It's smart.coop. Thanks. Bye.
Wonderful.
So those are great videos. Thanks a lot, Daphne, for showing
No
those.
problem.
And there's lots more available from the Platform Co-op Consortium too. So
Awesome. And then you said that I need to give you back.
right, I've got just a couple more slides to complete.
There you are. You are now the host
Okay,
again.
great. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so let's see, current slide. There we go. So here's some resources that people can easily get access to in terms of finding out more about platform cooperatives and how to do them, and worker co-ops and just co-op principles in general. So there is a platform cooperative development kit, and that's, I've got the link there, and Daphne will share my presentation so that you can easily get that link, or you can just do a duck on platform cooperative development kit and you'll find that. Platform Cooperatives now has an online course. They started it during the pandemic, and I'm just trying to think the dates. There was originally 418 people from 50 countries that registered for the summer course. That was just this summer. And because of its popularity, I think over 1,000 people tried to register, but they could only take 418. So the new school in New York City, Trebor, Scholz's organization, is working with Mondragon University from the Mondragon Cooperative Group in the Basque region of Spain. And they'll be running the course again, which is really for people who want to develop a platform cooperative. It's really hands-on, it's really focused on that. So proponents of cooperative platform cooperatives. So the next session will be run from October 26th to January 29th, 2021. And it only costs $200 Canadian. And for gig workers or people who are precarious employees, they provide a discount too. So it's really accessible, highly recommend it. I've talked to some people that have taken the course, they really enjoyed it. And it's something to really seriously consider. And there's all kinds of resources that the Canadian Worker Co-op Federation offers, including if you want to start a platform cooperative with worker co-ops, they can provide a small grant to help do that. So right now they're working with the Fedora workers in Toronto, Ontario. They unionized and Fedora declared bankruptcy in Canada. And now there was just a settlement that was announced today of $3.5 million for the workers. But there's a good group of workers from Fedora who want to start their own platform cooperatives. So that's one of the things that's happening. There's other provincial co-op associations and of course, Cooperatives and Mutuals Canada. I just want to summarize as a co-op developer some basic steps in developing a co-op. And this applies to platform cooperatives just as much as it applies to any other kind of cooperative development business. So the number one thing is to identify a need for the group. So whatever that economic and social need is, make sure that it's really clear and that people understand that if they cooperate together, like Daphne said in one of her initial slides, they can actually get that need fulfilled, and they can't do it necessarily as individuals. You need to organize a core group and get the members organized. So that's important. That's where the Fedora workers are right now in Toronto. They're in that process. And they're just starting to look at the financial feasibility of starting up their own platform cooperative. I'm sure it's going to look very positive. Once you've got the feasibility, if that looks like a go ahead, it doesn't always, sometimes it comes back as not being feasible. But once it is feasible and you've figured out the economic case, then you want to do a business plan for the cooperative and explain what you want to do and how you want to do it. Make sure it's understandable and accessible language. And then you can incorporate the cooperative at the same time. Once it's incorporated, you can raise capital for the business. There's all kinds of ways of doing that. It's a really flexible structure. You can get outside investors as well as the members investing, and then start up operations. And this isn't really a linear process. These steps kind of all work together, but there are some go, no-go decision-making points in this process. Once you're starting up and you're working on governance and management, because what often happens with startup co-ops is they focus on their business operations very much, which is important, and the cash flow and generating revenue and getting the kinks worked out. But you also need to focus on the cooperative governance and democratic management of the business. Co-ops that only focus on the business operations can often fail because of governance issues and power struggles and things like that, because human beings are human beings. However, the governance piece, do not ignore that as you're developing a cooperative. It's something that's important and ongoing. And then finally, I already talked about the triple bottom line earlier tonight, and I think that's a really useful thing to think about when you're framing a business. There's a flourishing business plan process that you can go through. There's a cooperative sustainability scorecard that takes a triple bottom line. There's all kinds of tools out there that are looking at this. So I think it's important for us now as cooperatives to be leaders in the world around the triple bottom line. So if people have questions, we can have some discussion, or we can move on to Darden's presentation. I'm really excited to hear what Darden has to say. So I'm going to close this slideshow now, and I'm going to go back to Daphne as the host. Let's see. Stop sharing. Okay. Okay, so Daphne, you're the host again.
My Wonderful. Thank you, Russ. And that was just an amazing overview. I really love the contextual component there, where you are giving us information about why do we care about this stuff. And I scribbled everything down and then realized, wait, we have the slides. So yes, I will put the slides up on the Kamloops Public Market website under resources. They will be there. I know I've promised that for the last 3 webinars, but I know that I have 4 to put up. I will make sure they're all there. So
Great.
thank you so much for that presentation. I really appreciate it.
Do you want to have questions now, or do you want to have Darden go ahead, or what would you prefer?
You know what, I don't have any in the chat.
Okay.
So why don't we let Darden go ahead?
Great.
And then we could always have a fulsome discussion at the end, which is sort of how we have tended to have people interact in past webinars. So
that sounds good.
Okay, wonderful. Let's go ahead then, Darden. I will now move you into a host position. So now you are the host, and you're able to now share your screen.
Well, thanks a lot. Thanks, Ross, for this incredible content sharing about all the current economic context and social context we live in. Good evening, everyone. Linda, Karen, Jaden, Pam, and Barbara, all these people here tonight. That's very cool of you to join this webinar to discuss together about the potential of platform cooperativism. Let me start because, you know, Daphne and Russ mentioned Eva. So right away, I'm going to tell you what Eva is. Well, Eva is a simple ride-sharing app that can be downloaded on any mobile phone. So I invite you to download it, and then you can order a ride from point A to point B, get an upfront pricing, and discover your own city. So I'm gonna share PowerPoint, and please feel free if there's any question or anything. So are you all able to see my PowerPoint? Sounds good. So I'm going to talk today, this evening, about the next generation of instant local mobility. Because yes, surely the cooperative model is a key aspect to EVA, but to be honest with you, out of our 26,000 rider members, I will say there's maybe 1% who truly know that EVA is a co-op. So I'll bring the main problem that brought us to create EVA, our solution, our mission, what you need to know about EVA as a platform cooperative, the business model, the market, the traction we built, and what we did in the COVID-19 situation. And I'll discuss, I'll finalize with our current operations. So here's a cute picture of my colleague, the co-founder, Raphael, at our former office downtown Montreal. So the first major problem with Uber, because if you have a discussion with any municipal representative or municipal government, and you ask them, what are your biggest problems? And most likely they will answer you, Uber or Airbnb. These companies create a lot of problems within a city. So the first problem with the traditional ride sharing that Uber and Lyft created in the US is a lack of commitment from the drivers in the ride share business. Most drivers are on many platforms at the same time, and they're generally very critical about the platform they're driving with. They know that they're being exploited, and we have the concrete proof whenever there's a huge protest in Paris and in San Francisco and in New York. The second problem is for riders. Surge pricing hurts the wallet of the riders. They never know how much they're going to pay for the ride. And what's worse about surge pricing is that most of the surge goes to the platform in this case Uber or Lyft, and not the driver. The current ride-sharing companies are disliked by most cities and governments. Just to give you a context, right now in California, there is this bill, AB5, that's currently being discussed, and Uber and Lyft joined forces. They invested $110 million in lobbying against the bill AB5. And what this bill does essentially, it changes the status of self-employed workers to employees, which will grant drivers health insurance, sick paid days, and all the social benefits that come with the employee status. And last but not least, the independent contractor status is challenged in many jurisdictions, including British Columbia, including Quebec and California, New York, and much more. So what is EVA? Well, EVA, it's an app. It's an app which goal is to improve people's life, members' life with local and sustainable mobility. Let's disrupt the disruptors by making a sustainable business model for local members while rendering business costs more efficient. Because one of the problems with Uber and Lyft is that they're spending money like there's no tomorrow. While the taxi industry was sustainable, financially speaking, for the last 6 decades. So what we did 2 years ago is that we started EVA by combining blockchain-based technology, which ensures data privacy, and the cooperative management model in one app. And in the last year, we connected over 30,000 people, 30,000 members with one application. And we're currently Montreal's second ride-sharing app after Uber, but way before Lyft. And we're now looking to expand in the rest of Canada and the United States. This picture, I love it. And I'm just gonna take a minute to talk about it because this picture is, well, this is the main entrance of the Montreal's International Airport, which, for your information, is the second largest airport in Canada. And per year, there's 15 million people going through these doors, and there's 15 million people, well, not now because of COVID, but pre-COVID, that were seeing these signs. And guess what? EVA is over Uber. So I like this one, thanks to the airport. What is our model? Concretely speaking, our model is a social franchise-based model. So we have one entity developing a blockchain-based technology because, as Russ explained, we're now getting back to aristocracies back 300 years ago when we had these lords, kings, and queens that were ruling the world. And nowadays, these kingdoms and the queens and the kings are Jeff Bezos, are Amazon, are Apple, Facebook, Uber, and all these companies that exploit the most valuable resources, the resource that we have, which is data. Data is the oil of the 21st century. And with blockchain, with our technology, data, like all the personal information of our members, is encrypted within the device. Not for the drivers, because for security purposes, we need to have like their criminal record background and stuff like this, but for the riders. So getting back to our social franchise model, we have EVA Global, which develops the technology, the branding, the quality insurance, and the global marketing. And we have the cooperatives. These co-ops are owned by both drivers and riders because we think that riders have a lot to bring within this business. So these co-ops, they manage the marketing, the drivers management, the operation support, and customer service, which is in our word, member services. So far, we have 3 social franchises, one in Quebec, one in Alberta, and one in New York. The only one up and running right now is the one in Quebec, which is in 2 cities, Montreal since a year, and Quebec City since yesterday. So it's a brand new launch we did. we basically franchise the app in cities around the world. And the reason why we do so is we listened to this guy in Cape Town, and I was in Cape Town a year ago to meet with the prof that the driver just mentioned. And one of the problems is that platform cooperativism isn't that easy. A lot of people, and I was among these people, think that, hey, it's just an app. Let's create an app. But actually there's the whole business intelligence between the technology, and you need to manage the network effect because the interaction is done through an app. So our solution is a solution to every community. Think about Victoria, think about Vancouver. If there's drivers, riders, and we have support from the, let's say, British Columbia Cooperative Association and the Cooperative Mutuals Canada, the CMC, well, sky isn't the limit anymore. We'll be able to, within a month, just launch a ride-sharing app with drivers and riders. Why is that ride-sharing is an important issue to tackle is that by 2025, ride-sharing will reach 209 billion market. And right now, Uber and Lyft, because they're a duopoly, they control 35% of this potential. So the rest doesn't belong to these companies, mostly owned by some billionaire shareholders that don't give, a damn about what's happening on the road. The remaining 65% of the market share should be to the cooperative movement, to us, to the people. One way that we were able to get that much of a traction in Montreal and positioning ourselves as number 2 is that we eliminated surge pricing and we reduced our commission. So Eva was taking 15% instead of 25%. And at the end of the year, well, the profit can be shared among the members based on their participation. So we're focusing our business around the members' well-being, members' services. In the very first year, so pre-COVID, we sold over 15,000 rides and 1,000 of deliveries for the first year, which in comparison is much more higher than Uber and Lyft on their first year of operations. We're also developing a new instant delivery platform, which can be connected to any online marketplace, and all the delivery drivers are members of the co-op. And one key to this success was a strong team we were able to get. So this is only the team for Eva Global, but there's a whole team for Eva Quebec, another one for Eva Alberta, another one for Eva New York, which is, to be honest, very quite strong. And getting back to funding, because there's actually a problem with platform cooperativism the problem is funding. We were able, and that's the reason why I put this slide in, because I want to have this discussion with you and maybe share some ideas. But as you may know, there's no shares, well, there's no equity in a co-op. So you cannot sell, let's say, 25% of the company and get 5 million in return as a VC investment. So for our first year, we were able to secure 0.8 million equity free, which means that the movement is still 100% democratically owned by both riders and drivers. But it's a huge problem. It's a huge problem. And in the last 2 years, I've met a lot of, we've met actually a lot of platform co-ops, entrepreneurs in London, some when I was in Barcelona in the Smart City World Expo, in New York, in San Francisco. And one of the big turn-off point is that it is hell hard to get funding. And I think, and I'm throwing this, this problem out here in this webinar, because I know among us, there's a lot of people truly invested within the cooperative movement. And if we want to see more cooperative alternatives in the digital world, we want to see a cooperative Facebook, a cooperative Zoom, well, we need to build the tools, the funding tools for this to happen. Otherwise, it's hard because you need to create the network effect, which is subject to Metcalfe's law. So here's a quick video.
Eva, not him. Eva, the app. This is Charles, a young guy that likes football, good pastries, movies, his city, but what he likes the most is being socially responsible, and that's why he drives for Eva. No, not her. Eva, the app, a Montreal cooperative that aims to facilitate transport in the city. It works for early birds just as much as night owls, for active people and not so active people. Because with Eva, we make life easier while contributing to local economy.
So before ending this presentation, I just want to mention that I personally think that the cooperative way of doing things is the best. And I totally agree on what Russ said about the growth of neoliberalism and its impact on our, on our life. And in a way, neoliberalism has become a new fascism. It is involved in every aspect of our lives: our religion, our way of living, our way of traveling, and it will drive us to a dead end with the climate crisis and the growth inequalities. And what I like to say is that the last capitalist we hang shall be the one who sold us the rope. We must keep on the fight, help each other to create better alternatives to Google, Facebook, Uber, Lyft, Amazon, and all these companies. And these alternatives don't have to be not for profit, but they should be not for loss, which means it is not necessarily for profit or not for profit. But the idea is to keep an ecosystem in which we empower the members. And before ending, because I saw that Russ presented some books, so I'm gonna just give some books I like a lot. So there's this first book, is called Platform Capitalism, which discuss about Google and Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, Uber, and Airbnb, and how toxic are these companies. There is this other great book from Trebor Scholz, which is called Uberworked and Underpaid, which critically details the situation of Uber partner drivers around the world. There's also this great book called The Blockchain Revolution. You cannot achieve platform cooperativism with the traditional way of managing technology. So it has to be your blockchain or it's nothing. Because the moment you have a closed ecosystem, it means that you have a possible leak for your data. And if you lose your data, well, data, as I mentioned earlier on, it is the most valuable asset for Uber, for Facebook, for Google, for Amazon. So there's this book. And the last book, shit, hold on. My office is a mess, sorry. It is called Super Pumped of Mike Isaac. He's a journalist from the New York Times. He basically details all the, the story of Uber and how they became this baby crying corporate worldwide. So this is it from me. I'm going to share the host to Daphne. Hold on. Wait, I have some trouble to find Daphne.
BC Co-op Association.
Oh, is it? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, my apologies. BC Co-op Association. I was trying to wave my hands too so you could see me.
Okay, yes. Well, thank you everyone. Gail, Crystal, Kiran, Linda, Olivier, Rob, for listening to me.
Wonderful. Oh my goodness. I just love the energy that you provided in your overview there. I loved the video too. I'm glad it was muted because I was giggling quite a bit through it. So thank you very much. And I wrote down the names of those books. Having said that, maybe Darden, I'm not sure how proficient at typing you are, but if you put them in the chat, I can also save the chat as well. Thank you so much to both of the presenters. I did have one question that that was posed here. Question for Russ. There seems to be a tipping point where the number of members in a co-op is most effective. Too many and the feeling of community having a voice is diminished. Do you know if there's a similar tipping point with platform co-ops?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I'm not sure there's a tipping point. I think really what's important is that there's a dedication of resources, time, and energy to cooperative education within the organization, and that includes, employees, workers, the users. Mountain Equipment Co-op, for example, has almost 4 million members. Hopefully EVA is going to surpass that. And, a $5 membership, lifetime membership, isn't really much of a commitment. And if that's what it takes to shop at Mountain Equipment Co-op, including online shopping, then okay, well, that's no big deal. It's not much of an entry fee. So I think there's things that cooperatives need to do in terms of reconsidering their membership over time and how to engage them. And because we do have this, amazing tool on the internet and all kinds of different social media and ways to communicate. And there's a great little worker co-op called Lumio. They created this software that allows people to share information and decision-making and things like that. So I think it's really up to the imagination of the cooperative leaders in the different cooperatives to figure out how to engage their members. So I think there isn't really an upper limit to the members. And I think we need to focus on those networks like Darden was talking about and really emphasize communication between the members of the cooperative and between the members themselves.
Awesome. And Darden, did you have anything that you wanted to add there at all about, your co-op seems to be quite big, and are you feeling, you'd mentioned there was maybe a sense of some of the drivers maybe don't know that they're working in a cooperative, or maybe the users, I'm not really too sure. But do you have any thoughts about engagement with the co-op members?
Well, as Russ mentioned in his presentation, is that a lot of co-ops, when they start, they focus more on their daily operations. And to be honest, the whole idea of EVA as an idea just started 2.5 years ago. So from that to now, we had to work a lot to make our product up and running, to get all the licenses and everything, and to create the app itself and the technology. Obviously, I don't think we should neglect democratic participation and cooperative management. I think it is a lifetime job for every co-op, all the farmers co-ops, merchant co-ops. However, and we need to better engage with members, and with the new technologies, we're now capable of having a better communication and integration of more members at the same time. But the fact is, we did a lot of surveys to our rider members, and a lot of them, truly don't care. If you ask them what's the difference between Uber and EVA, they will, answer you, well, EVA is cheaper. That's pretty much it. A lot of people don't know that we're a Montreal-based company. A lot of people, I will say most of them, don't know that we're a co-op. Actually, every month I drive as a driver. So I take my car, and the idea is I'm giving free trips to meet with the riders. And it actually never happened that a rider told me that, hey, EVA is a co-op and that's why I'm using it. And most of them is, hey, a friend of mine told me it's cheaper. A Uber driver told me to try out EVA and stuff like this.
And to follow up on that, I have a comment or question, wondering about how or whether that can serve the cooperative movement. But I think that we've talked here about how, you know, one side of the possibilities of using this platform cooperative model is that just the benefits to society and generally, you know, and to your point of it having less expensive prices and better work conditions for the employees. But is there anything else that you might add to that? Like you potentially down the road, maybe more engagement or what have you with your membership?
Well, you know, and Russ mentioned mountain equipment co-op. I will, you know, no matter how the cooperative is managed and no matter how members are involved, I will rather go to mountain equipment co-op than Canadian Tire or any you know, centralized business owned by some shareholders. And this, I have the same feeling for the largest credit union in Canada, Desjardins, which is the bank I'm with. And even though, you know, there's sometimes I'm like very critical about Desjardins because at the end of the day, even if you're a member, you don't get more than the TD bank customer. However, at the end of the day, Desjardins invest in community sports. Their CEO doesn't add a salary of like 4 billion like it is the case for a TD Bank or CIBC or whatever. So the goal here is, you know, I would love to see my generation transforming all the big companies into co-ops. There's absolutely no reason why Facebook isn't a co-op. There's no reason. But in order to achieve this goal, we need to give co-ops the means of their ambitions. And this is capital. This is funding. Mm-hmm. You cannot launch a Facebook, you know, type website without $1 billion in funding because you need a network effect. And the network effect, what is a network effect? The network effect is, think about the cell phone. If there's only a Russ and let's say Crystal who have a cell phone, well, there's no purpose of the cell phone. You guys just met and that's it. But when the whole humanity has a cell phone, well, now the cell phone becomes a very practical tool because we can all exchange with each other and add fancy apps on it and we can like improve the technology. So this is the same for Eva. This is the same for all the platform co-ops, is that you need to build the network. And that's the reason why we opted for this social franchise model, so that we can engage in more cities with more communities and therefore have more members using the app.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just one more thing that struck me while you were speaking there and talking about your generation. I have a lot of hope for your generation in terms of cooperatives and recognizing the need to come together and things like that. And I think that by having conversations about cooperatives and what a cooperative is and having people come together and ask those questions, and then, you know, you and your network talking about cooperatives and me and my network and Russ and his, I think that people will seek those opportunities out to support the cooperative movement. To your point, Desjardins here in BC, Interior Savings and other credit unions, Van City. So the point is that once people start knowing about co-ops, then they will say, wow, why didn't I know about this sooner? But great, let me find more. So anyway, there's more comments here.
So sorry, Daphne, there was a question from Barbara earlier.
Yeah. Yeah,
what is the legal? Oh, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I was just going to get to it. I was realizing that I was going on there and then thought I should get to the question. But yes, of course. Barbara asked, what is the legal structure within co-ops as a protection against legal action from users and or members, as in users or members suing the co-op?
Right. So I can take a stab at answering that question. So cooperatives that are incorporated are limited liability corporations. So What that means is that there's 2 or 3 important aspects of that. The first one is that as an investor or a member of a co-op, you can only lose what you invest. So that's the limited liability in terms of your investment if somebody sues you. And there's also a board of directors and errors and omissions insurance that you can carry as a board. But boards of directors for co-ops generally are volunteer, and there's a lower standard of care that they have compared to a paid board of directors. So the courts and the common law have generally been a little bit more lenient on cooperatives. And in terms of the structure legally within the co-op and the protection against action from users and members, yeah, there is protection through that limited liability. But I think the most important protection is prevention. So the prevention is really around what I was talking about earlier, the co-op education, for people to understand that, you know, it's like that old Joni Mitchell song, you don't know what you got till it's gone. Maybe people won't value democracy until the democracy's been taken away from them. And that's what surveillance capitalism is doing. It's taking away our will to make our own decisions, and it's a huge behavior modification experiment. So it's really important for all of us of all ages to understand how important democracy is. And honestly, you know, climate chaos is a scary thing, and you know, it's a huge concern. And we can't deal with climate chaos if we don't have democratic structures for decision making. So as human beings, if we continue to go down the road of surveillance capitalism, we are not going to find a way to solve the issues around climate chaos. So it's really important for us to support organizations and platform co-ops like EVA and others, because that's how we're going to get ourselves out of this mess. And the more people that understand in their workplaces and in their economic everyday activities that those can be democratic too, that's going to create the kind of revolution that other people are talking about.
Awesome, thank you. And Crystal has said, I love how Darden and Eva have created a way to franchise the app and to create a platform solution, pardon me, in other communities. Our platform co-ops typically open to sharing information regarding the structure, so we don't have to completely reinvent the wheel to create a similar co-op in our country. And then she goes on to say, i.e. creating a platform co-op like Smart Co-op for Canadian gig workers. And I suppose we can talk about the cooperative principle about cooperation amongst cooperatives. And I think you both touched on how cooperative, some of the co-ops you've worked with can be in creating ecosystems for to create other co-ops. But maybe in your experience, is there, I'm not familiar with the Smart Co-op. I know I was really excited when I was watching that video, but Russ, I'm not sure if you know whether they enable sort of franchising that in
Yeah, they do. They're expanding in different countries in the world, including Mexico and, you know, other countries, and it's expanding quickly. And the way they're doing that is by sharing the model. And all kinds of different cooperatives, from food co-ops to childcare co-ops to renewable energy co-ops and now platform co-ops. One of the strengths that they've always had is that they have shared information, operating procedures, governance procedures, member engagement ideas. You know, they share, it's like an open book business, their financial systems, all the benchmarks that they use in measuring their success. So that's just a huge advantage for cooperatives and compared to regular businesses or regular corporations.
Yeah, awesome. And I know I didn't say it out loud specifically, but Olivier did say for Darden, does members care about being part of a co-op? And you did touch on that when I mentioned the earlier question too. So, and I saw that you noted there in the comments, thanking him for his question, but I think we touched on that. Do we feel comfortable? Okay, good. Does anybody want to unmute themselves or come on the screen and ask a question at all? Please feel free. We have a bit more time here with these awesome speakers. Or we can, if nobody has any other questions, we can wrap it up. Should I say going once? Just kidding. Never really sure how to end these before we hit our time limit. So
before we do end, I'd like to just have a closing remark, but I'd love to hear other comments or questions that people have. That would be great.
Say that one more time, Russ.
If people, it'd be great to hear other people if they have comments or questions. That'd be great to have a little discussion. And I'd also just like to make a short closing statement or remark.
Okay. I think we have a shy bunch tonight. Kieran is going to stay in the dark because he's in his pajamas. But having said that, if we're not going to continue, Russ, I would love to hear what your closing comments are.
Well, I really am totally inspired by Darden's story with Eva. And I think, it shows what can be done with ingenuity and creativity and collaboration. And I really think there's so many opportunities for young people. I know during this pandemic, it's, a really challenging time for people. And I felt the COVID blues myself, because we're not able to have the kind of social interactions that human beings need. And we start feeling a bit isolated, and, this pandemic's going to go on and on. So there's many opportunities for us to support each other and help each other to create these platform cooperatives that can really make people's lives better. And it can happen in all sectors of the economy. Like, I just love what Jen's done with the healthcare co-op, getting patients' ideas to, researchers and medical professionals. Like, if we ever needed that, we really need that right now during the pandemic. So what a fantastic idea. Wouldn't that be great if every community had one of those healthcare co-ops where all that information is shared and people can improve their lives on a day-to-day basis? Now we're facing, sending our kids back to school, and there's a lot of fear around that, and teachers and their workplace, and, governments have had months to plan for that. And there's other countries like Denmark and other countries that have been doing this for months, and we could learn a lot from them. So I really think the whole idea of just collaborating and sharing information and moving more towards an open book business, these are some of the positive things that can come out of the pandemic.
Awesome, yes. Coming together in community on a platform. Cool. Oops, we have some questions I saw coming up here. Crystal, and it looks like Darden has answered here, but she mentions that Darden indicated raising funds as a stumbling block. Are community bonds a potential solution? And it isn't long-term sustainable. What's more, most platform cooperatives don't get members before launching their app, which is why the money is needed.
What I mean just by that, if I may answer to Crystal, by the way, very interesting question, is that back in the days, you had this group of farmers, gathering together, pulling their resources together. So, hey, I have 2 tractors. Hey, I have a farm, and I have here a garage. Now let's create a co-op. So the members existed prior to the co-op creation. Well, in platform co-op, most of the time, so if we think of, let's say, a cooperative version of Airbnb, a cooperative version of Uber, members arrive once the platform is launched. And the money is needed to launch the platform. So, it's the other way around. So that's why community bonds, it isn't sustainable, because let's say you want to launch in Washington, D.C. Well, we don't have members there prior to launching. We have members once the app is up and running. So yeah, that's basically my answer. And like we've tried to do it in Quebec, in Montreal. We were able to raise 5 or 4K, but that's not enough to. This is basically a day of marketing, so it's we really need more to make this whole project a reality.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a number of cooperative development funds in different countries, and including in Canada. And the Canadian Worker Co-op Federation has a small fund, Tenacity Works, but they have they're lobbying the federal government to increase that to $70 million, which would go part of the way to helping certainly worker co-ops and platform co-ops. But I think the cooperative movement has a broader mandate to start to understand that if they don't work together with some of these emerging cooperatives that are really entrepreneurial, like platform cooperatives, their own business model is going to become obsolete. So it's a great idea to get some of the established co-ops that are doing well now to work together with some of the innovative pioneering platform cooperatives to bring their business model into the 21st century too, and help them with their member engagement, help them with their revenue generation and new distribution systems. And there's all kinds of things that can be done with platform cooperative, working in partnership together with established co-ops. So I think to get the established co-op leaders to understand that is going to be a challenge, but I think, again, this pandemic might really help them because they can see what's happening in the economy.
Mm-hmm. Like the Canadian Credit Union Association.
Right.
Yes. We should talk. Yeah. Kieran asked about how to get into co-ops, and I asked where Kieran is located, because there is likely a provincial co-op association with a listing of cooperatives either in their area or so that they can become a member. But generally speaking, that is a good resource in Quebec. So is there a Quebec co-op association?
Yeah, there's a number of them in Quebec.
Okay.
So yeah, just look it up with DuckGoDuck. Go ahead, Darden.
Well, Quebec is 1/5 of Canadian population, but it has 1/3 of the Canadian co-ops. So it's a really cooperative-driven province. The largest bank in the province is a co-op, and there's a lot of resources. So there's the CDRQ, which can help you to develop the co-op. There's the network co-op, which is another network that has the tools to first register the co-op. There's the CQCM, which is the equivalent of the British Columbia Cooperative Association, which is the Conseil québécois de la coopérative et de la mutualité, which has the whole support for you to get with financial partners. And then in terms of financial partners, well, for sure, there's Desjardins. They're cooperative all the way, so they have these funds for co-ops. There's also the what we call the RISC, which is the Quebec Social Investment Network. They only invest in social economy driven businesses, so which is nonprofit or co-ops. There's also the two big unions, the FTQ, the FTQ, which is the Construction Workers Union, and also the CSN, which is a Central National Union, which both of them have funds for co-ops. So it is possible to get a sustainable amount of funding. And plus, depending on your city, I know Quebec City has some specific programs for new startups, Montreal as well with what we call PME Montréal. So in any case, feel free to just message me so I can help you around. But again, it depends on what you want to create. If your goal is to become the next big Amazon in a cooperative version, well, I'm just advising you, like, you need to be very creative to get funding, because it is not like the VC world. I have friends who have started a startup similar as the one we're building here, Eva, and they've raised twice as much capital as us with lower results because VC fund is so speculative. They get huge amount of resources, upfront to start their business, while us we're kind of stuck into our, limited resources. And I do agree with you, Russ. Just to conclude, and I don't want to take much more time, but I do think larger cooperatives have a huge responsibility in helping out newer co-ops. I'm thinking here about Mondragon, I'm thinking here about Best Western, I'm thinking here about Mountain Equipment Co-op, I'm thinking here about the Limited Cooperative Federation, or Federated, whatever their name is. I'm thinking here about AgroPur Cooperative, the co-op, the farmers co-op in the province of Quebec, because this support is actually the best support a platform co-op can get, because these co-ops have a huge amount of members. And let's say, just we're talking here, but let's say tomorrow the Mountain Equipment Co-ops calls us and they say, hey, we can make all our members of EVA. You know how huge this could be for us as a cooperative to scale up our business, let's say in Vancouver or Victoria. So anyway, for Karen, if you have questions about Quebec, just message me.
Wonderful. Yes. And
yeah, there's also a worker co-op federation in Quebec too.
True. Yes.
Yes, and to the point too, one of your slides, Russ, there is a slide of resources in your presentation.
Right.
So we can always take a look at that and see where a person could either become a member, go to your local credit union and open an account, or whatever works for you in your area. That is a good first step as well. So lots of great co-ops in Canada, in our provinces, and lots of resources for that. So I'm not seeing any more questions on here, but I do want to also conclude by thanking both of these presenters. I learned so much tonight. I'm excited for the future of our world, of our country, to know that people like you are out there. So thank you. I super appreciate having you on here. Thank you to everyone listening here. And feel free to pass on the information that we will be posting this on the Kamloops Public Market Cooperative website. Under resources, I will get my button gear and get this up there so that you will have access to it, this and past presentations. So again, thank you to the Cooperatives First. They do work with cooperatives. They're our a sponsor for the evening. BC Co-op Association is letting us use their Zoom account. And again, thank you to the presenters. And with that, I guess we can say good night.
Great. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.